Don't touch that horse. Caleb Whitaker's voice cut across the auction yard just as two ranch hands dragged the Apache woman away from the black stallion. For one strange second, even the shouting seemed to stop. Arizona Territory, 1889. Noon sunlight burned white across the dusty corrals, flashing against belt buckles, wagon rims, and the frightened whites of the stallion's eyes. The woman stood with her wrists pinned behind her, long black hair loose across one shoulder, her warm brown skin streaked with dust. She did not beg. She did not struggle. Caught her riding Whitaker stock, one man said. Horse thief. Caleb barely heard him. His attention was fixed on the stallion. The animal struck the fence with one hoof and threw its head as another man reached for the reins. Caleb stepped closer. 6 years had changed the horse, more gray around the muzzle, heavier muscle across the shoulders. But then the stallion turned its head. Beneath the left ear was a pale crescent-shaped scar. Caleb's breath caught. Midnight. The name moved through him like a ghost. 6 years earlier, that horse had disappeared into the canyon country carrying Caleb's 21-year-old sister, Emily. Search parties had found flood wreckage, broken branches, even part of Emily's riding coat. They had never found her. They had never found Midnight. Until now. Where did you get him? Caleb asked. The Apache woman studied him without answering. A ranch hand grabbed Midnight's bridle. The stallion reared violently. Men scattered. Then the woman spoke one quiet word Caleb did not understand. Midnight froze. She stepped forward and laid her bound hands against his neck. The great black horse lowered his head against her shoulder. Caleb stared at them. Whatever had happened 6 years ago, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This woman had not stolen Midnight's trust. Caleb raised one hand, and the ranch hands reluctantly loosened their grip on the woman. Midnight remained pressed close to her, breathing hard, his black coat shining beneath the merciless Arizona sun. Caleb moved slowly around the stallion until he saw the faded Whitaker brand beneath the dust. There was no mistake. This was the horse he had searched canyon after canyon for 6 years. Yet the woman beside him showed no fear of being exposed, only exhaustion. What's your name? Caleb asked. Her dark eyes stayed on his. Tala. Did you steal him? A murmur passed through the crowd. Tala looked at Midnight before answering. No, nothing more. The town marshal stepped forward, but Caleb blocked his path with an arm. Something about Tala's silence felt less like guilt than restraint. And what happened next would force Caleb to reopen the one wound he had spent 6 years trying to bury. Because Tala had not come to sell Midnight. She had been bringing him home. And hidden inside her saddlebag was something that had once belonged to Emily Whitaker. For days earlier, far south of the auction yard, Tala had ridden beneath a burning afternoon sky with Midnight beside her, carrying a promise she had waited 6 years to keep. 4 days earlier, Caleb Whitaker woke before sunrise to the sound of a mare kicking softly against her stall door. He dressed in the dark, crossed the cool yard, and entered the barn with a lantern swinging from one hand. At 38, Caleb had spent most of his life around horses, long enough to know that animals rarely hid what they felt. Fear tightened the eye. Pain changed the rhythm of a step. Trust showed itself in the small distance a horse willingly surrendered. He ran a hand down the mare's foreleg, found a pebble wedged beside the shoe, and worked it loose. By the time he stepped outside again, dawn had begun spreading pale gold over Whitaker Ranch. The property stretched across several hundred acres of dry grassland, cottonwood breaks, corrals, and low hills burned copper by the Arizona sun. Horses moved like dark shadows through the eastern pasture. Caleb knew nearly every one without seeing a brand. He knew the gray gelding that favored his right hind leg after winter, the chestnut mare that hated thunder, the young sorrel that would steal a man's hat if he stood close enough. Once, he had known Midnight better than any of them. Caleb crossed to the house and poured coffee into a tin cup. Above the mantel stood a photograph of two young people beside a black yearling. Caleb was 26 in the picture. Emily was 15, laughing because Midnight had just tried to eat the ribbon from her hat. Caleb rarely looked at the photograph for long. 6 years earlier, Emily had saddled Midnight and ridden toward the western canyon shortly after noon. Storm clouds had gathered over the mountains before anyone understood how quickly the weather was turning. The flash flood came hard enough to tear cottonwoods from the creek bed. Caleb searched until darkness, then again at first light. For weeks, Men rode every wash and ridge within 30 miles. They found a torn piece of Emily's riding coat tangled high in a branch. They found hoof marks disappearing where the canyon floor had been ripped apart by water. They found neither Emily nor Midnight. Flood took them both, people eventually said. Caleb learned to nod when they said it. Nodding was easier than explaining why some part of him had never believed it. Midnight had been bred on this ranch. Caleb had trained him from a colt and watched Emily turn the difficult black horse into something gentle beneath her hands. Midnight was strong, sure-footed, and stubborn enough to fight for solid ground. Caleb could believe a flood had killed him. What he could never understand was why they had found no saddle, no bridle, no body, no piece of Midnight's tack except what the water might easily have carried from somewhere else. For almost a year, Caleb kept searching. Eventually, the ranch demanded what grief could not give back. Fences broke. Foals were born. Accounts needed paying. His father's health failed. Then his father died, and Caleb inherited land that had no patience for a man staring toward empty hills. So he worked. He learned to keep loss in places where it would not frighten the horses. Only one thing remained untouched. Emily's old spare saddle still hung on the far wall of the tack room, beneath a canvas cover. It was not the saddle she had ridden away with. It was the one she had used for years before Caleb bought her a newer one for her 21st birthday. Twice, ranch foreman Gideon Shaw suggested selling it. Twice, Caleb said no. That morning, Gideon found him repairing a gate near the North Corral. He was a thick-built man in his mid-40s, sun-darkened beneath his hat, with a voice that rarely rose above a calm drawl. He had worked for the Whitakers since before Emily disappeared. Auction in town tomorrow, Gideon said. We could move those 2 bays. Caleb tested the hinge. Not ready. Buyers won't know that. Caleb looked at him. Gideon gave a dry smile. That's why you're the boss. He walked away. Caleb watched him only a moment before returning to the gate. Nothing about the exchange seemed important then. By noon, the Arizona heat had flattened every shadow beneath the corrals. Caleb spent the afternoon checking yearlings and marking repairs in a small ledger. Near sunset, he entered the tack room for a coil of rope. The canvas covering Emily's saddle had slipped from one corner. He stopped. Dust lay across the leather. Caleb reached up and touched the worn saddle horn. A memory came without permission. Emily leaning against the barn door, telling him he worried too much. He had told her someone had to. She had laughed and said, "Then try worrying about something useful." Caleb pulled the canvas back into place. Outside, horses shifted quietly beneath a violet evening sky. He locked the tack room and walked toward the house, never imagining that almost 100 miles to the south, an Apache woman named Tala was riding north with a black stallion beside her. Midnight was older now, his muzzle touched with gray, but the pale crescent scar beneath his left ear remained. And tied safely inside Tala's saddlebag was a small silver hair comb engraved with 2 letters Caleb would have recognized anywhere, EW. Nearly 100 miles south of Whitaker Ranch, Tala rode beneath a sky so bright it seemed to bleach the color from the land. Heat shimmered above the open desert, bending distant ridges into wavering shapes. Her own mare, a compact dun with dark legs, carried her steadily along the higher ground while Midnight followed on a loose lead. Tala rarely pulled the rope. She did not need to. The black stallion had traveled beside her for years, and he knew the difference between being led and choosing to follow. At 28, Tala had spent enough of her life with horses to understand that difference mattered. She stopped beneath a cluster of cottonwoods near a shallow spring and dismounted. Dust softened the worn leather of her moccasins and clung to the hem of her clothing. Her warm brown skin shone beneath the hard afternoon light, and long black hair had worked loose around her face during the morning ride. She drank only after both horses had been watered. Midnight lowered his muzzle, then lifted it again and nudged her shoulder. "I know," Tala murmured. She ran her fingers beneath his left ear, over the pale crescent scar that had been there since before she knew him. He was no longer the frightened stallion she had first seen 6 years earlier. That animal had arrived wild-eyed and bleeding, his reins torn, his black coat striped with dried mud from the flood. Emily Whitaker had been tied across his saddle only because 2 Apache hunters had found them before either could collapse completely. Tala had been 22 then. She still remembered Emily opening her eyes beneath the shade of a cottonwood shelter, confused by unfamiliar faces and too weak to sit. She remembered Midnight refusing food until Emily whispered to him. She remembered the young white woman's hand resting against his nose while Tala cleaned a wound along her ribs. Emily had remained with Tala's people far longer than anyone expected. Some wounds closed. Others did not. During those months, Tala learned pieces of her story, never all at once. Emily spoke of a ranch north of the desert. A brother named Caleb who worried too much. A black stallion he had helped her train. Sometimes she spoke with affection. Sometimes fear entered her face when she mentioned going home. Tala had never forced the reason from her. Trust did not grow under pressure. One evening, when autumn wind moved softly through the grass, Emily had removed a silver comb from her hair. 2 letters were engraved along its edge. EW. She placed it in Tala's palm. If Midnight ever goes home, Emily had said, take this with him. Tala had looked at the comb, then at her. You will take him? Emily's smile had been tired. Maybe. Tala had disliked that answer. Years later, she still did. Now, beside the spring, Tala opened her saddlebag and touched the small bundle wrapped in cloth. The comb remained inside exactly as Emily had left it. She had waited 6 years before beginning this journey, not from forgetfulness and not from fear. The road north had not been safe. Men connected to the ranch trade moved horses through settlements and remote stations, and Tala had learned enough from Emily to understand that Midnight's return could expose more than an old disappearance. Only recently had word reached her that changes around Whitaker Ranch might finally make the journey possible. She still did not know whether that was true. She knew only that promises could become another kind of burden when carried too long. Midnight was aging. Caleb Whitaker was still alive. The time had come. Tala wrapped the comb again and returned it to the saddlebag. She checked Midnight's hooves, then the dun mare's cinch. Nothing in her movements was hurried. She had several days of country ahead, and haste killed horses faster than distance. By late afternoon, clouds gathered above the western mountains, though Tala knew from their shape that they would bring little rain. She mounted and continued north. Midnight walked beside her, his ears turning toward sounds she could not yet hear. Once, near a ridge, he stopped and stared into the distance. Tala followed his gaze. Beyond miles of sunburned country lay the ranch where he had been born. Somewhere there lived a man who had spent 6 years believing both his sister and this horse had vanished into floodwater. Tala wondered what grief had made of Caleb Whitaker. She wondered whether he would see Midnight first, or the Apache woman bringing him home. She had known men who could not separate truth from the face delivering it. Emily had believed her brother could. That belief was part of the promise too. Tala touched the saddlebag once, feeling the hard outline of the silver comb beneath the cloth. Then she loosened Midnight's lead until the rope hung almost slack between them. The stallion stepped forward willingly. Tala turned north. With him. She was not taking Midnight anywhere he did not know. She was following him toward the home he had never forgotten. By the 4th morning, the land had begun to change. Low desert opened into wider grass country, and wagon tracks appeared more often beneath Tala's mare. Midnight had grown restless since sunrise. His ears stayed forward. Twice he lifted his head into the wind and stood listening before continuing north. Tala noticed, but she did not tighten the lead. Near noon, the roofs of a small town appeared beyond a rise. She had intended to pass around it. Then Midnight's breathing changed. The stallion was thirsty, and Tala's canteen held barely enough for herself. A wooden water trough stood near the edge of town beside a livery stable. She guided the horses toward it. Men noticed Midnight before they noticed her. The black stallion drank deeply while Tala filled her canteen at the pump. Across the street, a ranch hand stopped beside a wagon. His eyes narrowed at the faded mark on Midnight's flank. Whitaker brand. Tala heard him. She capped the canteen. The man crossed the street with another hand behind him. Where'd you get that horse? Tala rested one palm against Midnight's neck. I am returning him. The first man laughed. Returning him? His gaze moved over her Apache clothing, her saddle, then back to the stallion. The conclusion arrived before another question did. You stole him. Tala's expression did not change. No, by then others had gathered. A horse carrying a known ranch brand was property men understood. An Apache woman leading it was a story they believed they understood even faster. Someone called for the marshal. Tala glanced toward the open road. She could leave. Her dun mare was rested, and Midnight could run harder than any horse standing near the livery. But running would turn suspicion into certainty. More importantly, she had not crossed nearly 100 miles to flee when she was finally close to Caleb Whitaker. "I need Caleb Whitaker," she said. One ranch hand stepped toward Midnight's reins. "You need a jail cell." Tala moved between him and the stallion. "Do not pull his bridle." He ignored her. Midnight jerked his head away. The man grabbed harder. The stallion struck the earth, throwing dust across the trough. People backed away. "Hold him," someone shouted. Another ranch hand seized Tala from behind. She twisted free on instinct, but stopped herself before the movement became a fight. Two more men closed in. Tala knew what they expected from her. Resistance. A reason to make their fear feel justified. She gave them none. They pinned her wrists behind her anyway. Midnight saw it. His body changed at once. The black stallion screamed and reared, front hooves cutting through the sunlight. Men scattered. The lead rope snapped from someone's hand. "Get that damn horse." Tala's voice came low and sharp. One word. Midnight's ears turned toward her. She repeated it. The stallion came down hard, sides heaving. A man tried again for the bridle. Midnight swung away, nearly knocking him into the trough. Then a new voice crossed the yard. "Don't touch that horse." Silence moved outward from the words. Tala turned. A tall white man was pushing through the crowd, hat low over his sun-browned face. He did not look at her first. He looked at Midnight. The change in him was immediate. His stride slowed. His mouth parted slightly. For several seconds, he seemed to forget the people around him. Midnight turned his head, and the pale crescent scar beneath his left ear caught the noon light. The man stopped. "Midnight." The stallion's ears lifted. Tala felt something tighten beneath her ribs. "Caleb." She knew before anyone spoke his name. A ranch hand stepped closer to him. "Caleb." She was riding Whitaker's stock. "We caught her." Caleb raised a hand without looking away from the horse. He approached slowly. Midnight watched him. 6 years stood between them, yet something old passed through the stallion's posture. His head lowered an inch. Caleb stopped several feet away. He did not reach out. His eyes moved over the gray around Midnight's muzzle, the faded brand, the familiar scar. Grief and disbelief crossed his face so openly that Tala looked away for a moment. This was not a rancher inspecting recovered property. This was a man seeing something return from the dead. "Where did you get him?" Caleb asked. Tala met his eyes. "He was given into my care." "By who?" She did not answer. "Not here. Not with 30 strangers listening." The town marshal arrived and demanded that Tala be taken inside until the matter was settled. One of the men tightened his grip on her arms. Midnight immediately stepped toward her. Caleb noticed. He looked from the stallion to Tala, then back again. "Let her go." The ranch hand stared at him. "She stole your horse." "I said let her go." The hands released her reluctantly. Tala rubbed one wrist, but made no move toward the road. Caleb stepped toward Midnight and quietly spoke the horse's name again. Midnight watched him, uncertain. Caleb lifted one hand. For a heartbeat, Tala saw hope appear on his face. Then someone behind them grabbed the lead rope. Midnight recoiled violently. Tala moved without thinking. She placed both hands against the stallion's neck and spoke softly near his ear. The great horse shuddered once, then lowered his head against her shoulder. The auction yard went still. Caleb stared at the woman everyone had already named a thief. He had trained Midnight from a colt. He knew exactly how difficult the stallion's trust had always been to earn. No rope, threat, or stolen saddle could explain what he was seeing. "What's your name?" he asked. "Tala." Caleb held her gaze. "Did you steal him?" "No." The marshal gave an impatient sigh, but Caleb barely heard it. His attention had shifted to Tala's saddlebag. A corner of pale cloth showed beneath the flap, wrapped carefully around something small. Tala followed his eyes and placed one hand over the bag. Not defensively, protectively. Caleb understood there was more she had not told him. He also understood she had traveled a long way to stand exactly where she stood now. The crowd wanted a thief. Caleb wanted the truth. And as Midnight rested his scarred head beside Tala, Caleb began to suspect those were two very different things. The marshal planted his hands on his belt. "Whitaker, that stallion carries your brand. Unless you're saying otherwise, I've got enough to hold her." Caleb kept his eyes on Midnight. Dust drifted through the hard noon light. while the stallion stood beside Tala, his breathing finally slowing beneath her hand. "He's mine," Caleb said. A murmur moved through the crowd. Tala's expression remained guarded. "Then that settles it," the marshal replied. "Horse goes with you." "She goes with me." Caleb looked at Tala. She had been accused, grabbed, and nearly dragged away, yet she had spent more effort calming Midnight than defending herself. That bothered him. A guilty person might run. A frightened person might argue. Tala seemed concerned only with preventing the horse from hurting himself or someone else. "No," Caleb said. The marshal frowned. "No, it doesn't settle anything." One of the ranch hands laughed. "Caleb, she's Apache and she rode in with a Whitaker horse that vanished 6 years ago. What more do you need?" Caleb turned toward him. "The truth." The laughter died. Caleb stepped closer to Midnight, stopping well outside the stallion's reach. "Take your hands off the reins." No one moved. "All of you." The ranch hand reluctantly dropped the lead rope. Caleb bent, picked it up, and unclipped it from Midnight's halter. Tala watched him carefully. The marshal shook his head. "What are you doing?" Caleb stepped back into the open yard. "Finding out who he chooses." Midnight stood free. The crowd instinctively widened around him. Caleb removed his hat and lowered his shoulders, the way he had when Midnight was a difficult colt. "Come on, boy." The stallion's ears turned toward him. For a moment, Caleb saw the horse he remembered, the black yearling chasing Emily along the corral fence, the 3-year-old testing every gate on the ranch, the powerful young stallion who had once followed Caleb from pasture to barn without a rope. Midnight took one step toward him. Caleb's throat tightened. Then the horse stopped. His head turned. Tala stood several yards away with her arms loose at her sides. She did not call him. She did not reach out. Midnight crossed the space between them on his own and stopped beside her shoulder. No one spoke. Tala touched his neck once. Caleb lowered his hat to his side. Pain moved through him, but beneath it came something stronger than disappointment. Understanding. 6 years could change where a horse felt safe. It could change a man too. "That proves nothing," the marshal said. "It proves she didn't take his trust with a rope." Caleb walked toward Tala. "You said you were returning him." "Yes." "To me?" Tala nodded. "Then come to the ranch." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "As a prisoner?" "No." Caleb glanced toward her dun mare. "As the person who brought Midnight home." The ranch hand who had first accused her stepped forward. "You're just letting her ride away?" Caleb looked toward Midnight. "She's not riding away." He met Tala's gaze again. "She's riding with me." The marshal exhaled through his nose. "And if she disappears tonight? Then I was wrong." "That's simple." "Usually is." Tala studied Caleb in silence. He was not asking her to trust him. She noticed that. He had simply made his choice and left hers in her hands. She walked to her mare and checked the saddle. Caleb waited. When she mounted, Midnight moved immediately beside her. Caleb borrowed a gelding from one of his ranch hands and swung into the saddle. They left town beneath a sky bleached almost white by heat. For the first mile, neither spoke. The road passed between dry grass and scattered mesquite. Midnight traveled between them at first, then gradually moved closer to Tala's mare. Caleb watched the stallion without hiding it. "He always favor his left side when he's tired?" Tala asked. Caleb glanced at her. "Since he was 3. Old injury. Kicked through a fence." Tala nodded, as if confirming something she had already suspected. Caleb looked at the pale scar beneath Midnight's ear. That one wasn't there when Emily left. Tala's hands tightened almost imperceptibly around the reins. Caleb saw it. He did not ask another question. They rode on. The silence changed after that. It was no longer empty. It held something waiting. Near sunset, Whitaker Ranch appeared beyond the hills. Midnight saw it first. His head lifted. His pace quickened. Caleb felt his chest tighten as the stallion stared toward the distant barn. Tala loosened the lead completely. "Let him go," she said. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. Tala released the rope. Midnight stood still for one heartbeat. Then he broke into a run. The black stallion crossed the last stretch of open grass, mane flying, heading straight toward the ranch he had left 6 years before. Caleb followed at a slower pace, unable to take his eyes from him. Midnight stopped at the old corral and gave a low, trembling call. Horses answered from the pasture. Caleb dismounted near the gate. Tala remained mounted behind him, giving him the moment without entering it. He rested both hands on the fence and watched Midnight touch his nose to the weathered rails. He remembered, Caleb said quietly. Tala looked toward the stallion. Some things are not forgotten because they hurt. Caleb turned. Her words carried more than the horse. He knew it. She knew he knew. Still, neither pushed further. Caleb opened the ranch gate. There's a spare room in the house. Tala looked past him toward the buildings. I can sleep outside. You can. Caleb stepped aside. But you don't have to. Tala studied the open gate for a long moment. Then she guided her mare through it. Caleb closed the gate behind them, not with a lock, but with a loose wooden latch Tala could lift herself. She noticed that too. And as the last sunlight settled over Whitaker Ranch, Caleb understood that midnight had brought home more than an unanswered piece of his past. He had brought the one person who might finally tell Caleb what happened to Emily. And Caleb was beginning to understand that the truth would come only when Tala chose to give it. Morning came quietly to Whitaker Ranch. Tala woke before the first sunlight reached the eastern pasture and lay still for several breaths, listening. Horses shifted in the barn. A windmill creaked somewhere beyond the house. Floorboards answered a careful step in the kitchen. No locked door. No guard outside the window. Caleb had given her the small room at the back of the house and left without asking for the silver comb, Emily's story, or even an explanation for why Midnight trusted her. Tala had expected questions. His restraint unsettled her more than questions would have. She dressed and stepped outside. Dawn had painted the sky pale rose above the hills. Midnight stood at the corral fence, looking toward the barn as though measuring what remained familiar. Caleb was already there, carrying 2 buckets. His white skin was browned by years beneath the Arizona sun, his sleeves rolled to his forearms. He saw Tala, but only nodded toward a cup resting on the fence post. Coffee. Tala picked it up, smelled it, and took a cautious sip. Her expression changed. Caleb noticed. Bad. Strong. That means bad. Tala looked into the cup. I was being polite. Something moved at the corner of Caleb's mouth. Almost a smile. He went back to filling the trough. Tala drank anyway. For the next several hours they worked mostly apart. Caleb checked the herd while Tala examined Midnight in full daylight. The stallion had developed tenderness near his left hind hoof during the journey. She cleaned it carefully and found a small stone pressed deep beside the frog. Caleb returned as she was removing it. He crouched several feet away rather than crowding her. He let you handle his hind feet? Tala glanced at him. He lets you. Not when he's sore. She ran her palm down Midnight's leg. The stallion shifted his weight and relaxed. Then you asked too loudly. Caleb looked at her hands. I don't say anything. Exactly. This time the smile reached his face. Tala noticed and immediately returned her attention to Midnight. Later, near the south corral, a young colt caught a foreleg between 2 rails after trying to climb where no sensible horse would. Its panicked cries brought both Caleb and Tala running. Caleb reached for the gate, but Tala lifted a hand. Wait. The colt was fighting the wood, making the trapped leg twist harder. Tala entered slowly, turned her body sideways, and approached without looking directly into its eyes. She rested one hand against its shoulder and waited until its breathing eased. Caleb watched from outside the fence. When Tala finally nodded, he loosened the lower rail while she supported the colt's leg. Together they freed it. The animal stumbled once, then stood. Tala checked the joint with careful fingers. Nothing broken. Caleb replaced the rail. You've done that before. Young horses make foolish choices. Caleb tightened the bolt. Young men too. Tala looked at him. Do they improve? Some get better at hiding it. A quiet laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Caleb turned at the sound. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. Tala saw him looking, and the moment disappeared almost immediately, but something gentler remained between them. At noon, Gideon Shaw returned from checking cattle on the northern range. He rode into the yard, dismounted, and stopped when he saw Midnight. For half a second, all color left his face. Caleb was at the pump and missed it. Tala did not. Gideon recovered quickly. Well, I'll be damned. He approached the corral. Midnight's ears flattened. Tala straightened. Gideon looked at her next. His gaze lingered just long enough to make her skin tighten. Where'd she come from? Brought Midnight home, Caleb said. Gideon's eyes returned to the stallion. After 6 years? Looks that way. And you believe she just found him? Caleb set down the bucket. I haven't decided what I believe. Gideon gave Tala a thin smile. Careful what stories you buy. Tala said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence often made a man reveal more than questions did. Gideon entered the barn. Midnight followed him with his eyes until the door closed. Tala looked at Caleb. He has worked here long? Almost 12 years. You trust him? Caleb considered her. I did yesterday. The answer surprised her. He had noticed something too, even if he could not yet name it. That evening, Caleb set a plate of beans, bread, and dried beef at the kitchen table. Tala stood in the doorway. You don't have to eat in here, he said. But I made too much. She knew that was probably a lie. She sat anyway. Their conversation remained sparse. Caleb spoke about the ranch when Tala asked. Tala told him which water sources south of the hills still ran late in summer. Neither mentioned Emily. Not until Caleb's eyes moved toward the mantel. The old photograph stood there in fading light. Tala followed his gaze. She hated sitting still for pictures, Caleb said. Tala studied Emily's younger face. She still did. Caleb's hand stopped beside his cup. Tala realized what she had said. Silence filled the room. He could have demanded more. She prepared herself for it. Instead, Caleb looked down at his coffee. You knew her older than that. Tala nodded. Yes. His jaw tightened once. All right. That was all. He carried the plates to the basin. Tala remained seated, watching his back. Why do you not ask? Caleb rinsed one plate. I have asked. Not enough. He set the plate aside. If I force the answer out of you, I won't know whether I got the truth or just something you wanted me to stop asking for. Tala looked at him for a long time. Trust did not grow under pressure. Emily had once said something similar about her brother, though in different words. The next 2 days settled into an unexpected rhythm. Tala helped with Midnight and the younger horses. Caleb showed her where grain was stored without treating her presence near it as something to supervise. When she chose to sleep outside one warm night beneath the cottonwoods, he left a folded blanket on the porch and never mentioned it. When Caleb cut his palm repairing a corral hinge, Tala silently handed him clean cloth before he could wipe the blood on his trousers. Their fingers brushed. Both withdrew without comment. The moments were small enough to mean nothing. Yet Tala began noticing them. So did Caleb. On the third evening, they worked together replacing a warped corral rail while sunset turned the hills copper. Caleb held one end as Tala drove the wooden pin into place. Straight? He asked. Tala stepped back. No, Caleb looked along the rail. Look straight. Then your eyes are tired. He adjusted it. Now. Tala tilted her head. Better. You enjoy this. A little. Caleb laughed softly. From the barn entrance, Gideon watched them before turning away. After supper, Tala stood alone in the sitting room. Caleb was outside, checking a mare close to foaling. The house had gone quiet. Her eyes settled on the photograph above the mantel. Emily's face looked impossibly young. Tala reached into her saddlebag. For 6 years, she had carried the silver comb wrapped in the same piece of cloth. She unfolded it slowly. The metal caught the lamplight. Caleb entered through the back door, wiping his hands on a rag. He stopped when he saw what Tala held. The color drained from his face. Tala crossed the room and placed the comb on the table between them. Caleb did not touch it at first. Then one finger traced the engraved initials. I gave her this, he said. His voice was almost too quiet to hear. 17th birthday. Tala watched his hand tremble once before becoming still. Where did you find it? She could have said beside a body. In a saddlebag. In the desert. Any answer that bought another night. Instead, Tala looked at the man who had opened his gate without locking it behind her, who had waited 3 days while grief sat visibly between them, and understood that the moment Emily had trusted her to choose had finally arrived. I did not find it, Tala said. Caleb raised his eyes. The room seemed to hold its breath. Tala rested 2 fingers beside the silver comb. Emily gave it to me herself. Caleb did not move. The silver comb lay between them, catching the soft lamplight, its engraved initials worn smooth at the edges. For 6 years he had imagined Emily beneath floodwater, imagined her last moments so many different ways that grief had eventually blurred them together. Now Tala was telling him his sister had lived. How long? He asked. Tala understood. Months. Caleb lowered himself into the nearest chair. His eyes remained on the comb. Tala sat across from him, but left the space between them untouched. Midnight carried her out of the canyon, she said. 2 hunters found them after the flood. Emily was badly hurt. Her ribs, her shoulder, a deep wound along her side. Caleb closed his eyes briefly. Why didn't she come home? Tala's gaze shifted toward the dark window. Because the flood was not why she left the ranch. Caleb looked up. Tala told him carefully. Emily had discovered horses disappearing from Whitaker records months before her final ride. Animals listed as sick or dead had been sold elsewhere. Money had vanished with them. At first, Emily believed it was bookkeeping. Then she saw a man changing sale records in the barn office. Who? Caleb's voice had gone quiet. Tala hesitated only once. Gideon Shaw. The name seemed impossible inside the familiar room. Caleb stared at her. Gideon had eaten at this table, worked beside his father, helped Caleb search the canyon after Emily disappeared. Emily confronted him. She planned to tell you. He learned she knew first. Tala explained that Emily had ridden for town, hoping to reach Caleb before Gideon could stop her. He followed. The storm broke over the canyon. Midnight carried Emily through the rising water, but the flood scattered everyone and erased the trail. Emily believed Gideon would assume she was dead. She also believed returning openly while injured could put the people sheltering her in danger. Caleb stood and walked toward the window. Outside, Midnight was a dark shape near the corral fence. She could have sent word. There was no anger in his voice, only pain looking for somewhere to rest. She wanted to, Tala said. Then fever came. Caleb's hand tightened against the window frame. Tala did not tell him the rest yet. Not tonight. Some truths needed room around them. Did she know I searched? He asked. Yes. Caleb turned. How? A trader passed through months later. He spoke of the Whitaker man who rode every canyon asking for his sister. Tala's expression softened. Emily smiled when she heard. Then she cried where she thought no one could see. Caleb looked away. His shoulders lowered as though 6 years had suddenly found their full weight. Tala made no move to comfort him. She knew grief could resent a hand offered too soon. After a long silence, Caleb returned to the table. Why wait 6 years to bring Midnight back? Because Emily asked me not to return him while the man she feared could still control what happened here. I watched. I listened through traders and riders. Then I heard your father had died, and the ranch belonged fully to you. Caleb frowned. Gideon still works here. I did not know that until yesterday. Their eyes met. Caleb remembered Gideon's face when he saw Midnight. The brief loss of color. The warning about stories. Details that had seemed small now shifted into place. Does he know you knew Emily? He knows enough to be afraid. Caleb glanced toward the hallway leading to the back door. Tala watched him make the connection, but she did not reach for her knife or suggest running. Instead, she touched the silver comb. There is more. Caleb looked at her. About Emily? About what she found. Outside, a horse moved softly through the corral. Wind brushed the cottonwoods, carrying the dry scent of grass through the open window. Tala's voice lowered. Emily did not trust memory alone. She kept proof. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Where? Tala looked past him toward the dark shape of the barn. Somewhere Gideon has walked past for 6 years without knowing it was there. Caleb followed her gaze. For a moment neither spoke. Then he understood why Emily's old spare saddle had remained on the tackroom wall all this time, untouched beneath its canvas cover. Tala saw the realization in his face. She placed the comb gently into his palm and closed his fingers around it. Your sister knew you would keep something of hers, she said. Caleb looked down at the silver in his hand. 6 years earlier, he had believed leaving that saddle untouched meant he could not let Emily go. Now, for the first time, he wondered whether holding on had been exactly what she had counted on. Caleb did not go to the tackroom that night. Every instinct told him to tear open Emily's saddle immediately, but Gideon slept in the bunkhouse less than 50 yards from the barn, and Caleb had already spent 6 years without answers. He could wait until morning if waiting meant keeping the truth safe. Tala seemed to understand without being told. At dawn, Caleb worked as usual. He fed the horses, checked the water troughs, and spoke with 2 ranch hands about a broken fence on the western pasture. Gideon appeared shortly after sunrise, carrying a coil of rope. His gaze moved first toward Midnight, then toward Tala standing beside the corral. She still here? He asked. Caleb continued tightening a cinch. Looks that way. Gideon studied him. Town's talking. Says you brought an Apache horse thief home. Caleb pulled the leather strap once and released it. Town talks. Could become trouble. For who? The question was quiet. Gideon's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Your ranch. Caleb finally looked at him. Then I'll worry about my ranch. Gideon walked away, but Tala had watched the entire exchange from across the yard. Midnight stood beside her, his black coat bright beneath the morning sun. When Gideon passed within 20 feet, the stallion lifted his head and pinned his ears. Tala placed a hand against Midnight's shoulder. Caleb saw it. So did Gideon. By mid-morning, Gideon had gathered 3 ranch hands near the barn. His voice carried farther than he intended. He spoke about stolen horses, Apache raids, and the danger of believing a stranger over men who had worked the land for years. Caleb approached slowly. Something you want to tell me? Gideon turned. Only that your judgment's getting clouded. His eyes shifted toward Tala. She shows up with Midnight, tells you a dead woman spoke to her, and suddenly everybody who questions her is the enemy. Tala stood several yards away. She made no attempt to defend herself. Caleb noticed that too. Did I call you an enemy? Caleb asked. Gideon said nothing. Then why are you acting like one? The ranch hands exchanged uneasy looks. Gideon's jaw tightened. You knew Emily. Caleb's voice remained level. You helped search for her. So did half the county. Then you should want to know what happened. Gideon looked toward the barn. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough. Tala saw Caleb see it. Gideon stepped closer. That woman is lying. Caleb's face changed. Which part? Gideon stopped. What? I never told you what she said. Silence fell between them. Wind moved dust along the yard. One of the ranch hands lowered his eyes. Gideon recovered quickly. Doesn't take much imagination. Caleb nodded once. No, I suppose it doesn't. He turned away before anger could choose his next move for him. Tala followed him toward the corral. He is afraid, she said quietly. I know. Fear can make a man careless. Caleb looked toward the barn. Or dangerous. Tala met his eyes. Both. That afternoon, Caleb sent 2 ranch hands into town with instructions to bring back the deputy and old Whitaker sale records from the county office. He gave no explanation. He wanted witnesses before opening anything Emily had hidden. Tala understood the choice. You believe me? She asked as they stood beneath the cottonwoods. Caleb looked at her. I believe Midnight came home with you. I believe that comb belonged to Emily. I believe Gideon knew something this morning he shouldn't have known. He paused. The rest, I want to prove. Tala nodded slowly. There was no offense in her face. Instead, something softened there. Good. Caleb almost smiled. You're difficult to impress. You have not been trying. Maybe that's why I'm getting closer. Her eyes held his for a second longer than usual. Then Tala looked away toward Midnight. But Caleb had seen the faint warmth in her expression. Near sunset, the ranch hands returned with Deputy Nathan Cole and a leather case containing old transaction records. Gideon watched them ride through the gate from the bunkhouse porch. Caleb did not hide what came next. He gathered everyone outside the barn. 6 years ago, Emily believed horses were being sold off this ranch without my family knowing. A murmur moved through the men. Gideon stepped forward. And your proof is her? He pointed toward Tala. Caleb's gaze hardened. No, he turned toward the barn. If my sister was right, the proof is hers. Tala walked beside Caleb as he entered the tack room. Dust floated in narrow shafts of evening light. On the far wall hung Emily's old saddle beneath its canvas cover. Caleb stopped in front of it. For 6 years he had protected that saddle because it was one of the few pieces of his sister he had left. Now Tala stood close enough that he could feel the quiet steadiness of her presence without looking at her. He reached for the canvas. Tala's hand touched his wrist lightly. Caleb turned. Whatever is inside, she said, does not change who she was. Caleb looked at her hand, then into her eyes. The fear he had carried into the room eased, not gone, but shared. Tala released him. Caleb pulled away the canvas, revealing the worn leather beneath. Outside, the ranch had gone silent. And for the first time since Emily disappeared, Caleb was no longer afraid that opening the past would leave him alone with what he found. Caleb lifted Emily's saddle from the wall and carried it into the open barn where the others could see. He set it across a wooden rail beneath the hanging lantern. The leather was dry with age, the edges darkened where Emily's hands had once touched it every day. Deputy Nathan Cole stood near the barn doors with the old county records tucked beneath one arm. Gideon remained several feet away, his face unreadable. Tala stayed beside the doorway. She did not crowd Caleb. She had brought him this far. What happened next belonged partly to him. Caleb ran his fingers beneath the saddle skirt. Nothing. He checked the lining, the horn, the worn stitching along the seat. Maybe your sister hid nothing, Gideon said. Caleb ignored him. Tala's gaze moved across the saddle. Emily said she put it where someone would have to damage something she loved to find it. Caleb looked up. Then he understood. Emily had always cared for her tack obsessively. She would know Caleb would never cut it apart without a reason. He turned the saddle over. Along the underside ran a seam repaired with threads slightly darker than the original stitching. Caleb remembered seeing it years ago. He had assumed Emily had repaired it here herself. He took his knife from his belt. Gideon stepped forward. Caleb. The single word carried more warning than concern. Caleb looked at him. You worried about an old saddle? I'm worried you're letting grief make a fool of you. Caleb lowered his eyes to the seam. Wouldn't be the first time. He slid the knife beneath one stitch. The thread snapped. Gideon moved again. Deputy Cole shifted into his path without drawing his weapon. Let him finish. Caleb cut 3 more stitches and pulled the leather apart. Something crackled inside. The barn became perfectly still. Caleb reached into the narrow opening and removed several folded sheets of paper, yellowed but dry. His hand stopped trembling the moment he saw Emily's handwriting across the first page. Numbers, dates, horse descriptions, sale prices. Besides several entries were initials. G.S. Gideon's face emptied. Caleb unfolded another sheet. It was a bill of sale for 6 Whitaker horses supposedly lost to disease during the winter of 1882. Caleb remembered those animals. His father had blamed himself for months. Yet the paper showed all 6 sold to a buyer outside Tucson. At the bottom was a signature. Gideon Shaw. That could be anything, Gideon said. No one answered. Deputy Cole opened the county records and searched until he found the corresponding transaction. 6 horses, he said. Same markings. Same sale date. 1 ranch hand, Walter Briggs, stepped closer. Those weren't sick. Gideon turned toward him. Walter swallowed but continued. Shaw told me Mr. Whitaker wanted them moved to the north pasture. I helped load 3 onto a freight wagon after dark. Another hand stared at him. You never said that. Didn't think anything of it then. Caleb kept reading. More horses. More sales. Small numbers at first, then larger ones. Emily had traced each disappearance. She had written where the ranch books had been altered and which men had unknowingly moved animals under Gideon's orders. Caleb reached the final page. There, in Emily's hand, was a short note. If anything happens before I speak to Caleb, these records are why. Caleb closed his eyes. No one moved. Outside, midnight gave a low call from the corral. Gideon's voice broke the silence. She was confused. Caleb opened his eyes. Emily, she never understood the business. Your father was losing money. Horses had to be moved. Sales had to happen. Then why hide them? I didn't. Deputy Cole lifted the county ledger. Your signature says different. Gideon looked around the barn and seemed to realize how many faces had turned away from him. His hand drifted toward his gun belt. Tala saw it first. Gideon. Her voice was calm. Every man in the barn looked at him. Caleb did not reach for his own weapon. Don't. Gideon stared at him. Anger tightened his mouth. You trust her over me? An Apache woman rides onto your land with a horse missing 6 years, tells you whatever story she wants, and suddenly 12 years mean nothing? Caleb's eyes remained steady. This isn't about trusting her over you. He held up Emily's papers. It's about what you did. You think those papers tell the whole story? No, Caleb glanced toward Tala. That's why we're still listening. Gideon's hand remained near his revolver. Deputy Cole stepped closer. Take the belt off, Shaw. For several seconds, the only sound was wind moving against the barn boards. Then Walter Briggs moved to Caleb's side. Another ranch hand followed. Then another. Gideon looked at the men he had supervised for years and understood there would be no private version of this moment later. Too many people had seen the papers. Too many remembered pieces of the same history. Slowly, Gideon unbuckled his gun belt and dropped it onto a grain barrel. The leather struck wood with a heavy sound. Deputy Cole collected the revolver. You're coming into town. Gideon's eyes found Tala one last time. Midnight had appeared beyond the barn doors, standing at the corral fence with his ears forward. And her story about Emily? Gideon asked. You going to believe that too? Caleb looked toward Tala. I'll hear it from her. Gideon gave a bitter laugh. Then ask why your sister never came home. Tala's face changed. Only slightly, but Caleb saw pain move through it. Gideon saw it too. There, he said. Ask her. Deputy Cole took Gideon by the arm and led him toward the waiting horses. The ranch hands followed slowly, carrying the papers and county records. Caleb remained in the barn. The last light of evening stretched through the doorway in long golden bands. Tala stood near Emily's saddle. Caleb gathered the loose pages carefully and placed them on a workbench. He should have felt relief. Gideon's theft had been exposed. Emily had been telling the truth. Yet the question Gideon left behind remained. Caleb looked at Tala. He followed her that day? Yes. Did he hurt her before the flood? He tried to stop her. Midnight kept him from getting close enough. Caleb looked toward the black stallion. The pale scar beneath Midnight's ear caught the fading light. The scar. Tala nodded. Gideon swung a length of chain when Midnight turned between them. It struck him there. Caleb's jaw tightened. The scar was not proof by itself, but it fit Emily's hidden records. Gideon's fear and everything Tala had told him. He walked to Midnight and rested his palm beneath the old wound. The stallion leaned slightly into his hand. After 6 years, Caleb finally understood what that mark represented. Midnight had not simply carried Emily away. He had protected her. Caleb stayed beside him until the ranch grew quiet. When he turned back, Tala was still there. She had wrapped Emily's saddle in its canvas again, carefully covering the cut Caleb had made. Thank you, he said. Tala looked at him. For what? Not telling me what to believe. She considered that. You would not have believed me because I asked. Probably not. Then there was no reason to ask. Caleb almost smiled, but the weight in her expression stopped him. He knew there was another truth waiting, the one she had protected most carefully. Emily never came home, he said. Tala lowered her eyes. Caleb felt the answer before she gave it. He did not force the words from her. Instead, he walked to the barn entrance and sat on the low wooden step. After a moment, Tala came and sat several feet away. The evening had cooled. Crickets had begun sounding from the dry grass, and the western sky burned orange above the distant hills. Midnight grazed quietly beyond the fence. Caleb rested his forearms on his knees. You said she lived for months. Yes. His voice was softer when he spoke again. Was she alone? Tala turned toward him. The question held none of the anger she had expected, only the fear of a brother who had imagined 6 years of terrible endings. No, she said. Never. Caleb looked down at his hands. Some tension left his shoulders. Not much. Enough. Tala watched the last sunlight move across his face. She understood then that the truth he needed most was not how Emily had escaped, or what Gideon had stolen, or even why she had stayed away. He needed to know what the final months of his sister's life had contained. Tala had carried that part longest because it was not evidence. It belonged to Emily. And as darkness slowly settled around the barn, she knew Caleb was finally ready to receive it. The sun had disappeared behind the western hills before Tala began. She and Caleb remained on the barn step, separated by a few feet of weathered wood and 6 years of questions. Midnight grazed beyond the fence, his black shape moving quietly beneath the first stars. Emily was angry when she understood she could not ride home, Tala said. Caleb looked toward the pasture. He could almost hear his sister complaining about being ordered to rest. That sounds like her. Tala's mouth softened. She argued with everyone. Definitely her. For a moment, the memory was warm enough to make Caleb smile. Tala told him how Emily slowly regained enough strength to walk beneath the cottonwoods, then to groom Midnight again. She learned names, shared meals, helped children mend tack, and laughed when Midnight stole dried fruit from her hand. She spoke constantly of Caleb, not as the brother she feared returning to, but as the person she wished she could tell the truth. She wanted to come home, Tala said. Then why didn't she? At first, because she was too weak. Later, because winter came and the journey was dangerous. By spring, Tala paused. Caleb turned toward her. The wound inside her never healed properly. Fever returned. His face became still. Tala did not soften the truth into something false. Emily weakened over several weeks. She knew before the others that she was dying. One evening, she asked to be taken outside where she could see Midnight. Tala sat beside her until the stars appeared. Emily gave her the silver comb and asked her to keep the stallion safe until returning him would no longer endanger the people who had sheltered her. Was she afraid? Caleb asked. Tala considered the question carefully. Yes. His eyes lowered. But not of dying alone. She knew she was not alone. Caleb swallowed. Tala continued quietly. Emily had held her hand near the end. She spoke about the ranch kitchen, about the smell of rain on the corrals, about a brother who made terrible coffee and always checked every gate twice before sleeping. Caleb gave a broken laugh that ended almost as soon as it began. He covered his mouth with one hand. Tala looked away, giving his grief privacy without leaving him. Her last morning was peaceful, she said. Midnight stood outside. She could hear him. Caleb's shoulders trembled once. And you stayed? Yes. Until the end? Tala nodded. Caleb stared into the darkness for a long time. For 6 years, he had imagined Emily frightened beneath violent water. Now that image slowly gave way to another. His sister beneath open sky, someone holding her hand, midnight close enough to hear. The grief remained, but its cruelty changed shape. Thank you, he whispered. Tala shook her head. She was my friend. That answer struck deeper than gratitude could. Emily had not merely been rescued by strangers. She had belonged somewhere during those final months. She had been known. Caleb wiped his face with both hands and breathed slowly until he could speak again. Where is she buried? Near the cottonwoods where she recovered. I can take you there. Caleb nodded. Someday. Tala looked toward him. Whenever you choose. The next morning, Tala packed her saddlebag. Caleb saw it from the corral, but did not ask her to stop. The promise that brought her north had been fulfilled. Midnight was home. Emily's truth had reached her brother. Caleb helped tighten the cinch on Tala's dun mare, then stepped back. There's a stall beside Midnight's, he said. Tala glanced toward the barn. Fresh straw covered the floor. A bucket of water waited inside. Caleb had repaired the loose hinge before sunrise. For my mare, if she ever needs it. Tala looked at him. He had not said stay. He had not turned kindness into a claim. Caleb rested one hand on the saddle horn, then let it fall. Gate will open either direction. Tala's eyes softened. I know. She mounted. Midnight called from the corral, and her mare answered. Caleb opened the ranch gate. Tala rode through, then stopped beyond it and looked back. Morning sunlight stretched between them across the dust. Caleb stood beside the open gate without asking when she would return. Tala understood then why Emily had trusted him with the truth, even from far away. She gave him a small nod and turned south. Caleb watched until distance reduced horse and rider to a dark shape beneath the enormous Arizona sky. Then he walked back toward the barn. He did not close the gate. By early autumn, the mornings at Whitaker Ranch carried a coolness the summer had forgotten. Midnight had grown accustomed to the eastern pasture again. Sometimes Caleb found the old stallion standing beside the gate at sunrise, looking south. Caleb understood. He looked that way too. Then, one clear morning, Midnight lifted his head and gave a low call. Caleb stopped repairing the gate. A lone rider appeared beyond the ridge. Tala came slowly across the golden grass on her dun mare, her long black hair moving in the breeze. She carried no burden this time. No promise. No evidence. No reason Caleb could mistake for obligation. He opened the gate before she reached it. Tala stopped beside him and looked toward the barn. The stall Caleb had prepared remained empty, clean straw beneath the manger. You kept it, she said. Wasn't mine to give away. Her eyes returned to him. A quiet warmth passed between them. Tala dismounted and led her mare through. Caleb closed the gate behind her, then paused with his hand on the latch. Coffee. Tala considered him solemnly. Has it improved? No, a smile touched her face. Then I should probably stay long enough to teach you. Caleb smiled too. On the mantel inside the house, Emily's silver comb rested beside the old family photograph, no longer hidden away by grief. Outside, Midnight stood beside Tala's mare beneath the morning sun. Caleb and Tala walked toward the house together, their shoulders almost touching. Neither spoke about how long she would stay. They did not need to. 6 years earlier, a black stallion had disappeared carrying a secret into the desert. Now he stood peacefully at home, and the woman once called his thief had returned for the simplest reason of all, because this time, the road back had been her own choice.